I have repeatedly seen a new narrative being pushed by those on the political right. They claim that once Labour was a decent pro-worker party, but now Labour is controlled by the woke elites. Labour has abandoned the working class and now serves the woke elites. This is the narrative that some right-wingers are pushing. This narrative is utterly nonsensical. It does not make any sense. It is true that Labour is not as pro-worker as they should be. It is true that Labour is not as pro-worker as they once were. It is true that Labour is more socially progressive than they used to be. But Labour is still far more pro-worker than the political right. Labour is not as pro-worker as they should be, but they are still pro-worker. They are still far superior to the political right in this regard. The last Labour government raised the minimum wage significantly. The last Labour government introduced legislation to make trade unions more powerful. Labour increased the amount of sick leave available to workers. The last Labour government focused on keeping unemployment low and largely succeeded. Labour is still pro-worker, far more pro-worker than the political right. The right-wing coalition government is blatantly anti-worker. They have slowed minimum wage increases. The ACT Party wants to stagnate the minimum wage completely. They abolished the Labour government's trade union empowering legislation. They are going to reduce sick leave for many workers. They have increased unemployment rates significantly. Labour may not be as pro-worker as they should be, I agree with that, but they are still far more pro-worker than the political right. And social progressivism has nothing to do with the Labour Party being less pro-worker than they used to be. Social progressivism and pro-worker politics can easily go hand in hand. Labour is less pro-worker than they once were because the party was hijacked by right-wingers. In the 1980s, Labour was taken over by right-wingers. Roger Douglas, Richard Prebble, the man who founded the ACT Party and the man who led it. Both were high-ranking Labour Party politicians. Both were powerful cabinet ministers. They pursued right-wing economic policies and caused an enormous identity crisis within the Labour Party. The pro-worker identity of Labour lied in absolute tatters. Not because of social progressivism, but because of right-wing economics. Tax cuts for the rich, GST for the poor, privatisation, user pays, deregulation. This resulted in an identity crisis within Labour that spawned the moderate Labour Party we have today. Following the collapse of the fourth Labour government, many from the left-wing faction of the party abandoned ship, and so did the right-wing faction. This resulted in the creation of the Alliance on the left and the ACT Party on the right. These parties were able to survive and remain separate from Labour due to the introduction of the proportional electoral system in the 1990s. And so a moderate Labour Party emerged. This was reinforced by MMP. Third parties became viable, so Labour was no longer the only serious choice for the pro-worker left. Labour became a more moderate pro-worker option. Still better than the right, but not good enough. That is the reality. Not the stupid narrative about Labour becoming woke and abandoning the working class. That narrative is total nonsense. Labour is still far more pro-worker than the right-wing parties are. Labour is moderate, they are not as pro-worker as they should be. This is a result of two factors: the right-wing economics of the fourth Labour government, and the adoption of a proportional system. This gave rise to the moderate Labour Party of our time. That is the reality. Labour does sometimes get distracted by dumb progressive policies. Sometimes they waste away political capital on dumb progressive policies. co-governance and hate speech laws being two recent examples. But that does not mean they are controlled by a woke elite. And even mentioning an elite is pretty laughable, considering that the right is propped up on big money donations and led by an extremely wealthy man. The political right is as elitist as it gets. Even though he is a total joke, Luxon easily became leader of the National Party simply because he is an economic elite and the National Party worships economic elites. And in spite of their countless shortcomings, Labour is still much more pro-worker than the right. It is hilarious when right-wingers pretend to be pro-worker. The right-wing government they support is blatantly anti-worker. They have slowed minimum wage increases, they have presided over rising unemployment rates, they have abolished trade union empowering legislation, they are reducing sick leave for many workers. There is nothing pro-worker about the political right. The political right is blatantly anti-worker. That is the reality, and it should not be forgotten.